In my excitement for Joachim Trier's new film Sentimental Value, I rewatched his last movie, The Worst Person in the World, and my standout thought this time was, that was a mighty fine trip sequence. But what made it so good? It's a very simple scene that explores the innermost conflict and deeper intent of the main character in a technically and thematically very appropriate way, so naturally I thought, I have to milk this idea while the iron's hot in my brain. So I looked up trip sequences on YouTube to see if anyone else had already done this. Yeah, no shit. 2 years ago, Karsten Rundquist uploaded a video that covered the examples that I already wrote about. Fuck. But in that video, he broadly goes over techniques that make a good trip sequence work, whereas here I'll be going in depth on specific scenes. My conscience remains clear. Okay, I'll get on with it. So, how do directors effectively utilize a trip? Take the lemon scene from Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, which is my personal favorite use of a trip comedically. The scene is set up by Jordan and Donnie taking Quaaludes, but due to their age, they seem to have no effect. Conflict is introduced when Jordan gets a call from his lawyer, who tells him to get to the nearest payphone, which is at a country club a mile away from his house. It's here that Jordan is told that his friend Brad was arrested, and he realizes that was because of Donnie, and that the FBI has wired all of his phones. This is where the trip takes center stage. The editing creates a very false sense of reality for the viewer by cutting from Jordan's perspective in the country club to the lawyer's perspective in his car.
Dad, say that again!
I said I want to go with that ride.
Are you fucking high?
The reveal takes us off guard, and the reason why it works so well is because of the editing. Scorsese's longtime editor Thelma Schumacher breaks the pattern of cuts here and chooses to stay on Leo for 2 reasons. 1, to tell us that Jordan's perspective can't be trusted by the viewer. We will see more of this as the scene plays out. And 2, to tell us that from here on out, we will solely be in Jordan's perspective. This is doubled down on as we get a second version of the fall that uses distorting effects to better display what Jordan is feeling. I find Scorsese's use of this effect interesting since this is the only time we're going to see it throughout the sequence. This choice is actually very crucial to keeping that sense of false security that he created earlier, since it would be easier for the audience to decipher what is and isn't actually happening, but more on that in a moment. Instead of utilizing motion and handheld camera techniques, Marty uses long wide shots and static close-ups to allow us to observe the high rather than experience it like we would in many other films. A crucial part of any trip sequence is the performance, not just in how believable the actor is, but how well they understand the scene itself. Here, the buffoonery hinges very heavily on DiCaprio's performance and ultimately will decide if the entire scene works or not. Needless to say, DiCaprio delivers. This pairing of performance, direction, and editing is what leads to some of the funniest moments in any of Marty's films. Now that Jordan has gotten to his car, in theory, Marty reminds us with a phone call that he is not the only person who's high. Now Jordan's struggle is intensified, since Donnie could potentially ruin Jordan's scapegoat that he built with his Swiss banker Jean-Jacques. Scorsese continues to use wide shots and static close-ups while using the same editing from the beginning of the scene with the lawyer, but this time it cuts from Jordan driving home to Donnie on the phone with Jean-Jacques. The reason for this is to make us think that we have moved on from the trip. Since Jordan has partially regained motor skills, it makes us believe Jordan when he says this.
By some miracle, I made it home alive. Not a scratch on me or the car.
Which we later learn is not what happened.
Did you drive your car tonight, Mr. Balfour?
Well?
Now, I'll find any excuse I can to talk about Scorsese's work, but here I'm going to cut this scene off short for the sake of editing time. But I can't talk about trip sequences without talking about the trip sequence.
What's on the menu this evening, sir?
This iconic scene from Danny Boyle's Trainspotting is a crucial part of a string of scenes that push forward the story and the character development of Mark Renton, played by Ewan McGregor. But before we go on, there are some things that we need to understand to properly analyze the significance of this scene. The trip follows what is objectively the most disturbing scene in the film, that being the death of Allison's baby due to the horrible conditions the group put the child in. This moment is incredibly pivotal in that it brings Renton's biggest character flaw to light, his selfishness. Like anyone else, Mark can't think of anything to say that he would consider
something human.
Sick Boy quietly calls Mark to action,
See something, Mark.
then upon his hesitation, screams for his friend to say something.
I'm cooking up.
It's at this specific moment that Sick Boy begins to cry. It communicates to the audience that Mark's actions are just as impactful as what just happened. When Renton leaves the room to take a hit, Allison sees this as an immediate temporary relief for her grief. Relief for her grief? That's what I fucking wrote. So she asks Mark to cook for her too. In this moment, Renton also comes to the realization that Sick Boy was actually the father of baby Dawn. Though the people around him are experiencing the incomprehensible grief of losing a child, he decides that he comes first.
That went without saying.
This is quickly shown again after an extended version of the opening scene. We are now given context to why the characters are running from the police as they're caught and arrested for theft. Spud is sentenced to 6 months in prison due to past history, while Mark is free to go as long as he stays on his rehabilitation program. During a semi-celebratory lunch with his family and friends, Mark sneaks away during another inner monologue where he feels sympathy for Spud and wishes he could trade places. Like the death of baby Dawn, the only way Mark knows how to deal with a bad situation is with
one fucking hit.
This adds a bit more depth to Mark's character. He feels sympathy towards his friends, but he doesn't understand what he's supposed to do for them or himself, and he knows this. His self-awareness is key to the decision that he makes to better his life at the end of the film. The first thing that strikes me about the trip is the lighting. This is our first time back in the dealer's flat since Allison's baby, The backlighting behind Mark accentuates this unsettling atmosphere for the viewer, since we now know that in the scope of the film, anything can happen to anybody, because we're killing babies. With his fix now in hand, Mark takes the hit, which we see through a shot of the inside of the needle. The choice of this angle emulates the feeling that Renton is throwing his life down the drain. His subsequent trip is accompanied by Lou Reed's song Perfect Day off of his second solo album. Reed had a very publicly known history with heroin, with many references to the substance in his personal songs or the ones with his former band, The Velvet Underground. The track follows a man spending what he imagines to be his ideal perfect day on what many believe to be heroin, with repetitions of the lyrics, "You keep me hanging on" and "You're going to reap what you sow," contrasting to the character's mundane day, usually supporting this interpretation. But in a radio interview in 2000, 4 years after Trainspotting was released, Reed said this about the song: "No, you're talking to the writer, the person who wrote it. No, that's not true. I don't object to that, particularly whatever you think is perfect, but this guy's vision of a perfect day was the girl, sangria in the park, and then you go home. A perfect day. Real simple, I meant just what I said." Reed had also actually stated that the song was not about drug use in an interview with NME all the way back in 1973. Though the song's meaning may not be about drugs, I think that both meanings can actually be applied to Trainspotting. Besides this scene, the other most iconic aspect of the film is the Choose Life speech, which is echoed and reiterated throughout the screenplay, and I don't think it's a coincidence that this specific song is played so close to that monologue. And with what I spoke on earlier, we're about to see Mark start again, and eventually we'll see him finally be able to choose a job, choose a life, and even choose a family. But more on this later. I'm getting way ahead of myself. With the trip, Boyle had a very important decision to make. How was he going to depict what Mark is feeling? To visualize a sinking feeling, we see Mark fall through the carpet. In the distance, we can hear the sound of an ambulance growing closer as Mark is dragged by his feet down the stairwell. We're then shown Mark's POV, with the carpet serving as a vertical framing device. This is a unique way to depict a trip while also serving as a visual representation of time standing still. He's still perceiving sinking into the carpet even after he's moved out of the flat. The dealer successfully moves Mark outside, but the ambulance passes by as he lays in the road. I read this as an illustration of the risk of drug use and the societal divide between addicts and the populace. Boyle blocks this shot of the dealer sitting on the curb in a way that confused me at first. Why would he put Mark in the street while he sits off to the side? The purpose of this blocking directly correlates to the shot of the ambulance. There is a distance between Mark and the ambulance, or society, but there is also a distance between him and his dealer, or the drug world. As the cab approaches, the dealer rushes over to put him in the car and uses the money Mark paid him with for the cab fare, showing us physically and symbolically why the gap between a normal life is wider than the one with addiction for Mark. This world may put him on the brink of death, shown by his pale complexion and blue lips, but it will also give him a pat on the shoulder, or his cheek, whenever he needs it. After getting to the hospital, Mark is dragged out of the cab in the same way he was in the stairwell, but the driver takes the money out of Mark's shirt pocket with a seemingly annoyed expression before stepping over his body without any sympathy. Mark is looked at with the same annoyed expression by the hospital personnel. The choice to switch to a POV for these scenes is to literally show society looking down on Renton. This idea is expanded on with this dolly shot of Mark on the stretcher, where we see many facets of society from punks, middle class, and even doctors scowling as he's wheeled past. As Mark is being treated, the doctors work on him with expressionless faces and monotone voices, and we close out the scene just as we began with a POV, a shot of Mark's veins being raised, and the injection of a needle. Boyle makes another interesting decision here when Mark is revived. After he jolts up, we hear this sound. Normally, we would expect the song to end as it's drowned out by this noise, but it doesn't. This is what I meant about the use of Perfect Day. As he goes under, he experiences the first interpretation of the song, seeing this as his only fix and only need in life, but the continuation of it alludes to Mark getting that ending of a true perfect day, as he is literally and metaphorically revived. Even after all that yapping I just did, I didn't get into a lot of things, like how the pattern of the carpet Jordan lands on creates a sort of optical illusion effect as his distorted movement rolls on top of it, or how Mark is initially shown as dying as he is literally lowered 6 feet underground. I encourage you to watch both films to get a better understanding of the importance of these scenes, but these are just examples that I chose. There are so many directors that have crafted unforgettable scenes or even feature-length films that depict a trip that truly elevates the story and its characters. The technical and thematic proficiency needed to pull off a trip sequence is often neglected, as many filmmakers use it as a cheap way to farm laughs or crazy moments, but in the hands of amazing writers, directors, crew, and actors, they can be something truly special. Man, I really had to put my thinking cap on for this one, so if you're still watching, preach. And don't do drugs. Eat your vegetables. Yep.
Next time on Senegal.
I've blown up buildings, hunted sharks, crashed airplanes, and flown helicopters. Anyway, American Express commercial. Here we go.